When bad things happen, there are two ways to look at them. Either you can look at the negatives or you can look at the opportunities. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight I find out from Chris Sturgess, who's General Manager of Commodity Derivatives at the JSE, how we can make money from probably the worst drought in South Africa since 1992 and what markets are saying about it. When did maize prices peak, Chris? I think it was probably Valentine's Day. Farmers in the Free State were giving dead mealie stalks to their loved ones.
Yeah, that's spot on there, Bruce. I think just after Valentine's Day we saw an all-time peak, just under 3,000 Rand a tonne for white maize. Yellow maize didn't quite go to those levels.
It was close, 2,500 or thereabouts.
Yeah, that's it. So again, you know, as markets are driven by fear and panic, and at that stage things were really looking bad for the maize crop.
And the reason why the maize crop was looking bad was there hadn't been any rain since before Christmas and crops were withering in the lands.
In some areas, and I think that's the important point. You know, if you look at the crop estimates committees which have come out, they're doing crop forecasts. You know, we're still around 9.6 million tonnes was the last estimate.
Because last year was record, and we got 13.5 million tonnes or something crazy last
14 million tonnes. It was really a great year for us. So, although, you know, there's a 30% decline from the previous year, I think we're still okay. The big thing is, you know, the rainfall hasn't been throughout the country and it's really been patchy. You know, we heard a story from a farmer who said he's got windscreen wipers now. The switch works on either this side or that side, just to try it, because the rain is so patchy this year.
No, absolutely right. It's a good farming story. When it comes to derivatives, though, the agricultural derivatives market has fundamentally changed farming, hasn't it? Because farmers now no longer just place a bet in nature by putting in rows and rows of mini seeds and some fertilizer into damp soil and hope it'll like a little rain. They can now punt on the potential outcome of the season. That takes farming risk to a whole new level.
Bruce, I guess we shy away from the word punt because, again, there's different uses of the market. If you're going to use the market to hedge, really it's trying to reduce their risk. So yeah, they're putting seed into the ground.
What farmer, if you talk about risk, these guys are like skydivers. I mean, they really are. They take an enormous leap of faith by putting seed into the ground every single year and anticipating it'll rain. And more experienced farmers can read the seasons better than others and time their plantings. But they're using far more to punt than surely to hedge.
Well, you know, the recent studies, we've seen less farmers actively trading the markets. So they come in there and work through more of the structured finance players or the big multinational traders who fund margin calls, put down the good faith. And so from the early days of 97, 98, where this was a nice, exciting new tool and a lot of people were speculating, punting, using your language.
Speculating, let's use speculating. We can agree on speculating.
So we see less of that. I think farmers have realized there are risks with speculating, and there's less if you're using it pure to lock in a price that keeps you in business.
But you look at the volatility in the maize price. So Valentine's Day, white maize is at 3,000 Rand a tonne. Where's it at the moment?
So 2.7 on white, so we've come off slightly.
But that's a 10% drop.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're on the wrong side of that particular trade, you've lost money.
Well, you see, the wrong side is if you were speculating. If you were hedging, you were saying, well, I was content to lock in a price at that time because I can keep on farming. If you're a speculator, quite right, you've lost the money.
What percentage of people who are trading in agricultural derivatives are farmers versus people who are speculating?
Well, come back to just, are all farmers hedgers or speculators? And I guess that is where the dynamics is. If you look at our market breakdown, fair chunk, majority of our business is hedge business, where we have some financial players, hedge funds coming in and then using the market to speculate, to increase their returns. But by far still a bulk of our share is hedgers who are using the market either to manage price risk or to finance stock. Because remember, with the futures market, if you've got stock in the silo, you're in Viljoenskroon and you want to...
Imagine that.
Can you imagine that?
Why would anybody go there? I have no idea. But Viljoenskroon, being the epicenter of the universe, of course, as far as farming is concerned, they're very busy in that particular market. Now, you look at the maize price today at, say, 2,700 Rand a tonne. Tomorrow, the new forecasts come out. I flew into Joburg recently. It looked all around me. It's greener than it was a month ago. Suddenly crop estimates are going to be quite interesting, especially because was it Agri SA or Grain SA recently talking about importing thousands of tons of maize this year to cover the shortfall. There's a lot of this dynamic is quite interesting right now.
So it's good for markets because obviously as derivative markets, you want some uncertainty out there to drive market movements. But I think, in terms of imports coming in, I think we're very fortunate. We're in a transparent marketplace. We have this forward planning capabilities. And so, sure, there's a couple of yellow maize vessels moving into the country to try and alleviate the shortages. But because, again, I think we have to complement our current policies. We are able to move grain in or out the country. Whereas if you look at other countries like Malawi, they still bring in export bans.
Sure.
And which really makes it more difficult for the country to manage their own food security. Whereas, so we've seen prices spike, we've seen opportunities for traders to say, fine, if we need to bring in vessels, we'll do that. And so, if you look at the estimates for next season, maybe we'll import 500,000 tons, 500,000 tons of yellow maize, just to keep things on the balance sheet healthy.
But that's the magic of the market. The market then can determine the right sort of level of imports and exports at any given time. When, in an ideal world, say I'm Farmer Whitfield and I happen to have a piece of ground in Viljoenskroon and I am planting this year, it's November and the rains have come and I decided to put a crop into the ground. At that point, I want to hedge my exposure. Practically, how does it work?
So there's a farmer not quite in Viljoenskroon but close to Sunnishof, northwest, who also...
That's miles away.
He's got a great hedge strategy.
Okay.
That's where it comes in. And really, the farmer's outlook is he's putting a seed in the ground, but he's not too sure if he's going to get the product.
Yeah.
So what they do is they buy call options. Call option gives you the right to buy maize later on. So they will buy call options until the crop starts to mature, which is January, February, and then they lock in and either sell a future, which gives you the hedge there. So, you're using then the derivative instruments to its max. You're protecting yourself while the crop is developing to make sure you can get physical crop. And once you know you've got X amount of tons on the field, you lock it in and start to sell. Because
this is becoming, I'm sure, a much bigger dynamic as well, because commercial farming is becoming more and more consolidated. The risks are considerably higher. You've got commercial farmers now farming 20, 30, 40,000 hectares, taking teams of people from farm to farm, planting and harvesting and going through the whole process like that. They're doing that on a large scale. If they're not hedging, then they have a direct line to the heavens. Because it's one or the other.
They love punting. If they're not hedging, they love punting.
Okay, now you use the word punting. But it's taking out that protection against disaster, isn't it?
That's it, exactly. And that's what the original intention of derivatives. You think if you go back...
But they're being misused. I mean, Warren Buffett, weapons of financial mass destruction. We've seen the impact on financial markets in the last 10 years.
You're quite right, Bruce.
Of the failure of derivatives.
Where there's potential to make money, there's always going to be a potential for abuse of the instrument. But again, it's just... And I think it's always difficult for a farmer when you're stepping into this environment and you're so tempted to start speculating. But there's nothing wrong with it as long as you know your risk appetite around speculation and on the futures market is very different to trying to take out a hedge strategy.
But anybody who's willing to put a seed in the ground and hope it's going to rain is up, I'm sure, for precisely that. Can we make money this year still in what is believed to be probably the worst drought since 1992 overall?
So can we make money? And again, you need to look at it from different angles. As a miller, as a trader, as a farmer. And I think we've been focusing around the farmer. There are certain farmers who certainly are in difficult positions where they might even harvest less than a ton a hectare. So there is how have they managed to cover their input costs. And yes, so there will be some challenging questions to those producers, others who've been fortunate. And I think that's also the difficulty about farming is you drive into town and because the rains have been so scattered, you go past a neighbour whose crop looks phenomenal and you're suffering from drought. And that's the harsh realities of what we're dealing with. But for those farmers who've got a crop, this is a fair price. And will it do better? It all depends ultimately when the combine harvesters go in. Tomorrow the crop estimates brings through another forecast. But by far, we're not by the end game yet.
What is the derivatives market telling us today about what the forecasts are going to tell us tomorrow?
So yellow, good question, great question. So if we look at yellow maize, we were down. We were slightly down, and on white, we were 10 Rand up. So based on that activity, we're looking that we're going to get a slightly higher forecast around yellow maize and slightly less on the white.
And that's based purely on the fact that there have been better rains in the last month or so than there were in the month before.
That's it.
An uncle who was very firmly of the belief had a farm called Windsor, and he used to sit on his stoop and watch the rain come this way and watch the rain come this way, and he called his property the Windsor window because he's the only guy in the world who didn't get rain. Farmers are tough and unpredictable creatures, and farming is a tough and unpredictable sport. When it comes to the millers, however, you would think that they were sitting in the pound seats. They don't have to worry about anything. If the farmers bring the grain, they mill it. But the clever millers are taking out futures contracts to tie in their price so that they can sell at a profit later.
Spot on, and I think that's where often the challenge lies, because the millers have a very conservative hedge approach, whereas more short term. It's 13 weeks, 16 weeks out. Instead of, if you'd really seen that there was going to be this upward move in prices, you could have in December already locked in prices through to July at 2,400. But again, if we look historically, because the markets are so volatile, they tend to take a more conservative short-term view and then will hedge from there on.
It's a heady world of derivatives, crop derivatives, as we go hopefully out of the worst drought since 1992. Nobody wants to be dry, especially not the farmers. Chris Sturgess, General Manager of Commodity Derivatives at the JSE, though, giving us an insight as to how it all works. Thank you for watching. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow. Till then, good night and goodbye.